What's up, y'all? I'm Jackson Fordyce.
I'm Josiah Simons.
And welcome back to the Pitch Perfect podcast. I'm here with Rak Garg, partner at Bain Capital Ventures, and Kamal Shah, founder and CEO of Profit Security. Guys, thanks for taking the time to be on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely, yeah. So just to kind of get it out of the way from the top, we're media guys. We're not going to pretend to be anything we're not. So we probably won't go super in depth on cybersecurity or AI, just because that's not really our wheelhouse.
We're gonna pretend we know.
Yeah. So if you guys get into that, totally fine. A lot of our audience does know that kind of stuff. But in terms of just this conversation, if you see us, blank staring while you're talking about something, we're mostly focused on the relationship between the founder and the funder, how you guys met, what it took to get here, and now what the relationship looks like today. So with that, if you guys want to intro yourselves and what you do, and then we'll talk about how you met.
Please.
So my name is Rak. I'm a partner at Bain Capital Ventures. We're a $10 billion venture firm in San Francisco and New York, and we invest really from the earliest stages until IPO, and in some cases even after. The way that I got started investing was I worked at this company called Atlassian, and I was running product management for our security group there, which productized this business called Atlassian Access, which is doing a bunch of identity security stuff. I worked on Access for about 3 years. When I started, it was my first job out of college. By the time I left, it was one of the fastest growing products in the company's history. We were securing thousands of businesses, millions of users, protecting their data against prying eyes. And I left in 2020 to try to start a company around the same idea of data protection with identity as a first-class citizen. It was a complete failure. I mean, nothing about this product, I think, was good. But I met Enrique, who's a partner at Bain and who Kamal knows very well. And Enrique was on the board of Atlassian. And so I asked him for advice. And I asked him, how do I know if this is a good idea? How do I test these things? How do I know what to look for, basically? And his advice to me was, spend time with a lot of startups and figure out how actual businesses work beyond just products. And so I followed his advice. I joined BCV. I spent a lot of time with a lot of security companies, and I realized that I really liked investing. And so that's sort of where the last few years have taken me.
I'm really curious. BCV is a storied firm and they do great work. How did that happen where you got through the doors of this firm, and how'd the interview process go?
It felt less like an interview process and more like just getting to know a bunch of smart people. It was sort of like I would meet Enrique, we'd talk about something security related, and our conversation would go into AI. And, Enrique would say, oh, you should meet my partner, Arif. Arif spends a lot of time in AI. And then I met Arif, and we talked about building community in venture and how you invest in younger founders and how, you make venture accessible to them. And Arif said, you should meet my partner, Kevin. Kevin spends a lot of time with younger founders. And so I just met a lot of the people at BCV. I didn't feel like I was interviewing. I just kind of felt like I was talking about things I liked talking about with other really bright people. And over time, I found out that the firm really encourages every investor to have a major, just like college. And, my major very quickly became cybersecurity, partly because of what I had worked on before, but also because I just think it's so strategic. And it really is one of the biggest unsolved problems that everybody deals with today.
Yeah. Kamal, would love to hear more about your journey in Profit Security.
Yeah, sure. First, thanks for having me. In terms of Profit Security, this is my fourth startup. So, first time as a founder, but the other three startups, I was super early in two of them before product market fit. And in the third one, it was one customer and 50K in revenue and helped scale it to over 50 million. But the way Profit Security came about is my last two security companies I was with, the number one complaint that we heard about from our customers was too many alerts. And if you think about what's going on in the industry today, companies buy a wide range of security tools, network security, cloud security, endpoint, SaaS, identity, you name it. And what do all these tools do? They generate alerts. And then companies and security operations teams are inundated with trying to triage it, investigate it, and decide which ones are incidents and which ones are false positives. And so that was the problem statement that really attracted me to go do something about it. So after my last company was acquired, and after I spent 2 years at a large company, I decided to leave and start something to solve this problem. And coincidentally, ChatGPT had just come out and LLMs had come out. And so it was a unique opportunity to leverage AI to address this challenge.
Yeah. Rak, you mentioned, community in venture capital and investing in a younger generation. How are you specifically investing in this new generation of founders? We're both Gen Z, and I would imagine investing in Gen Z is a little bit different than investing in millennials. How have you seen that play out, and how do you invest or find next generation or next Gen Z founders?
I think it's less about how old someone is or what generation they subscribe to. I think it's more about the nature of these companies is changing really dramatically because now there's this new technology that no one has used before. And so in a lot of ways, we're all Gen Z when it comes to AI. The whole thing is only 4 years old.
Yeah.
And so the way that I think about partnering with these kinds of entrepreneurs is connecting really disparate skill sets. We started this incubator called BCV Labs about 1.5 years ago. And the whole point of this incubator is to connect really deep domain experts who understand a problem really viscerally, like Kamal in security as an example, with really deep AI researchers who are pushing the field forward, who can understand which models to leverage, what data to use them on, how to prompt the models to get the most out of them. And so, we've done that in a couple of cases, and that's sort of the way that we're continuing to invest in that community.
So for Kamal, so you exit out of a company, you're, probably celebrating that success, but you decide, I'm going to do it again. I want to start another company. What is it in you, in your entrepreneurial spirit that just said, like, I want to keep building something. It's just something I love to do.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a topic where my wife and I discussed quite a bit.
Was she excited for you to go round 4, I guess?
Yeah, she got tired of me being at home all the time.
So this is a vacation for her.
Exactly. But I have a child who's a Gen Z, so I'm definitely on the other spectrum. But what drives me every day is to just go and do something that makes a difference in the world, right? And starting a company is not the only way you can contribute to society and make a difference in the world. So I looked at other options, but my passion lies in building and solving something. And I was really passionate about the problem statement. And if you didn't solve this, I think there's an imbalance here between the adversaries and the good guys. And if we don't leverage AI to solve this problem, then it just becomes it will be very, very challenging for us. So the problem and the opportunity to make an impact and how we protect ourselves is really what drove me to go start a company. And then BCV was just a natural partner, just given the long history that I've had with the individuals in the company, in the firm.
Yeah, can you kind of go into that long history? How did you meet people at BCV?
Yeah, so it's crazy, but my history with BCV and the principles at BCV goes back before Rak was born, actually. So I met Arif in 1996 when he and I were at graduate school together. It was the first day of graduate school in the fall of 1996. And we were classmates, we were section mates. And then when I graduated in 98, I joined a company called Trilogy Software in Austin, Texas.
That's where we're from. That's our home.
Yeah, you go. And Ajay Agarwal, who was
at
BCV,
we love Ajay,
was my boss.
No way.
So I've known Ajay since 98. Ajay was at my wedding.
That's crazy.
Along with Arif,
Wow.
just to give you a perspective. And Arif and I have done 3 companies together. This is our 4th company. And our first company, Clearwell, was acquired by Symantec in 2011. And Enrique was the CEO of Symantec who acquired the company.
Deep roots all throughout.
It's deep roots. And Enrique and I have also served on a board together for a short period of time. So just know the folks really well. Rak and I worked together when he was at Atlassian and security side on a partnership with a company called Sky High, where I was working at the time. And so it's just deep relationships. And the reason it really matters is because when you're picking a partner, like a funder, as you said earlier, as a founder, what really matters at the end of the day is the trust you have with the team. How does the team operate, integrity, the ability to make sure that they will be with you, not just in good times, but also in bad times. And I've seen BCV operate in spades over the history, over 80 years, actually, working with them. And that's what really matters the most.
Hey, y'all. Do you enjoy listening to podcasts? Since you're listening to one right now, I'm going to assume you do. And if you enjoy podcasts, you need to download the Overlap app. We all love long-form podcast conversations, but who has the time to always stay up to date with 3-hour-long interviews? Overlap solves that problem for you by providing only the best podcast moments. The app's AI assistant curates playlists of personalized podcast clips that are tailored to your interests and favorite creators, like us. Just prompt it with any topic and instantly get a playlist of the best short-form moments. So jump over to the App Store now, like right now, and download Overlap. You can also find a link to download below in our description. It's free and we highly recommend it. The app actually does recommend great content, and I learn something new every day from my playlists. Thanks so much to Overlap for sponsoring this episode. What advice would you have for a founder who's just getting in, they're talking to VCs, and maybe they don't have that same level of experience where they can really say, oh, I can trust these people. I know them, they were at my wedding. Most founders can't have that kind of a story. So what can they do to really recognize, okay, this person's someone I can trust. This is a fund that's actually going to be with me step by step along the way. And how can they recognize maybe when that's not the case?
Yeah, it's a hard problem. And many founders that I speak to or give advice to, they're trying to optimize for valuation, or they're trying to optimize for, hey, can they connect me to my first set of potential customers, or can we connect me to a couple of founding engineers? And all that is well and good. But at the end of the day, you're entering into a long-term relationship with the firm, right? It's not a short-term relationship. And so you have to think deeply about what really matters. What matters is, do they operate with integrity? Can you trust them? Will they be with you, not just in good times, but in bad times? And I encourage all of them to do references and speak with founders that they have worked with, blind references, right? Yeah. Not just the references that they provide you. And that, at the end of the day, is what matters, and not whether you're getting an extra 10% on the valuation, or whether they can connect you to a couple of customers here or there. Although that's important, don't get me wrong. And BCV does a great job on helping you recruit your founding team and helping you sign your early design partners and customers as well.
I would imagine when you were raising for profit security, it's kind of a no-brainer since you know the team so well at BCV. Can you kind of walk us through what that pitch, if there even was a pitch, what that looked like for receiving funding from BCV?
Yeah, it wasn't, and it was a set of slides, so we didn't have a product or a prototype that we had built. But what's interesting when we presented the slides is that the problem statement resonated extremely well with Rak and Arif and Enrique, given their experience in security, particularly Rak and Enrique. So the problem statement was clear. They had worked with us in the past, so they knew that the team was, in their eyes, fundable or interested in funding. And what we had not solved for back then is on the technology side, right? What is the tech going to be? What are differentiators going to be? And that takes time, frankly. It's hard to put that up in paper. And so there was a trust there to say, okay, we trust this team. They will figure out on the technology side. But the pain is real, the market opportunity is real, and the team has proven that they can execute. But again, that's my perspective. So Rak is probably a better person to answer that question.
I was going to ask, Rak, what about that problem statement was so attractive to you and the BCV team?
First of all, I echo everything Kamal said. Deep domain expertise, their ability to execute, them being proven over three other companies, this being the fourth one. All of those things were definitely high predictors of confidence for us. On the specific problem and the pain point, security operations is a category that has been reinvented every 10 years for the last 30 years. And we can trace it all the way back to the 80s and 90s when there was a company and a product called ArcSight and QRadar. And then it turned over and became IBM. And then that turned over and became the SIM, which was dominated by Splunk. And now it's cloud data lakes and cloud data warehouses that are becoming the SIM. So we've re-architected the data layer many, many, many times. But the downstream of that, the process to deal with that data has actually always been the same. It's always been a group of threat hunters that sit together in a SOC, a security operations center, and they do incredibly grungy, incredibly manual data sifting work. They write scripts and queries. Some of those queries break. Some of them don't fit very well to new types of logs or new types of incidents. They have to go back and change them. They have to back test to make sure they didn't miss anything. Missing one alert, missing the wrong alert could mean that you get breached and you don't know for weeks. Missing the right alert, or actually there's this big problem of false positives where you're missing a bunch of alerts because you know that 99% of the time, they're not actually things you need to action. They're normal things that happen in the day-to-day course of a company. And so knowing which ones are false positives versus false negatives is a really important job. And it's really, really hard to do programmatically. And this is true for every security operations center in the world.
You're rocking the BCV Labs merch, and if I'm correct, it's an incubator for AI companies here at Bain Capital Ventures, correct? I'm curious, have you seen the most common hurdle that AI companies have to face when they first start out?
Every team struggles with something different. I find that research-heavy teams often treat their solution as a hammer, and they go looking for nails to hit the hammer on. And the issue with that approach is you typically want to start with customers. You want to start by validating a problem, figuring out a pain point, and then looking at your toolbox and saying, what can I build that's going to solve this problem? And so for us, a lot of the support we provide is teaching them how to do product, how to have product sense, how to talk to customers and get real insights. If you talk to 100 people, in my experience, 80 plus will say, oh, that's kind of cool. I think I would use that if you built it. And it takes someone who's actually built and executed something to look at that and say, none of these people are good customers. And so re-architecting that thinking is a really important part of working with research-heavy teams. On the flip side, when we work with industry teams, we find that they actually bring a wealth of network and a wealth of expertise, and we help supplement them with talent. And so a lot of the ways that we've supported other companies in BCV Labs is through our technical community. And these are vetted researchers, vetted engineers who look to us to suggest what is the next great company that I should join at seed or Series A? What should I bet my career on? And on the flip side, we help the founders connect with them and ultimately help them join the company.
So thinking back to that pitch that you guys were in the room together for, once you as a team recognize, okay, this is a great company and we really want to fund this, does that kind of shift in your mind to I'm getting pitched to now we need to pitch why we are the right fund for you? And is there an excitement? Is there a fear of like, oh, I don't want to lose this one. Let's make sure we really hammer home like we're the right people for you and we want you. What is like the emotions, the mentality that goes into that? I've always wondered for a venture capitalist, when you get excited about a company, what starts going through your mind?
I want to hear your perspective on this too, Kamal, actually. For us, it's less of a fear and more of a feeling of, I really want to work with this person. How can we make sure that they want to work with us as well? And the way that we try to validate that is by searching for fit. So every founder is a little bit different. Every team is a little different. Every problem is a little bit different. We try to show in every meeting that we understand. We get the problem you're in. We know the hurdles that you're going to have 2 years from now, 5 years from now. And here's what we can do today so that your path to 5 years from now is much simpler. And if we can come across that way, if we can make the founder have confidence that we actually understand the dynamics of this business, then it's less about, oh man, I hope I don't lose this deal.
Yeah.
It's more about, we want to work together. Let's find a structure that supports that.
Yep.
Yeah, from my perspective, there's a strong desire to work with BCV, given the relationships and the fact that I was, working out of BCV Labs as we are thinking about, exploring ideas, idea validation, but in the end, it was a difficult decision because I've also worked with a few other VCs over the course of the last 3 companies. And there are some deep relationships there too, and not as deep as BCV, but there are some relationships there too. And so there were some difficult conversations to be had. And it's never easy when you're in the middle of it, but we powered through it. We made the right call, and so far so good.
Yeah.
Rak, on your X account, there was a comment that you made about there's a large number of people, relatively young people, leaving San Francisco, maybe to New York, to other places. And I think you commented, like, anecdotally, you see this, and with your friends, you see people leaving SF to go to New York or other places. Why do you think so many people are leaving this city?
First of all, I'm appalled that you went to my X account.
Well, we have
what
to.
else did you find? Oh my god!
There's some
few more things. We'll get to those. We'll get to that.
Nah, you're actually really funny. You're actually really funny on there. There's one. I think. Sorry, I'm going to go back to this. It was like all my friends are either running marathons or having children. This is crazy.
True. It's very true. I'm neither of those, by the way. I got to pick one. I have to pick a lane.
If you had to pick one, what's going to be first?
Probably the marathon one.
Okay,
seems easier than having children. Kamal can attest to the counterfactual. I think that since the pandemic, since sort of the rise of remote work over the last 4 years, it actually is true that many sort of mid-20s or recent grads who would have been in San Francisco before COVID choose to go to other cities. I think what's reversed that to some extent is that SF is far and away the world capital of AI. And so, I have a younger sister. She's graduating college this year. My favorite question to ask people in college is, what are the best companies that everybody wants to go work for? This year, it's OpenAI and Anthropic. Both of those companies, far and away, are based in San Francisco.
Wow.
And so I think that trend is going to reverse as people who maybe don't work in AI find, for a variety of reasons, that other cities could be a better fit. And people who do want to work on AI and are working in AI are going to find that SF is the best place for them to build their company.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. My son is a rising junior in college, and he wanted to do an internship. He's a math CS major, and he wanted to do an internship at an AI company, as you would expect. And, the list of top 10 companies that he identified that he wanted to work at over the summer, 8 of the 10 were in the Bay Area. And as a 20-year-old, he wanted to live in New York, but again, all the companies were here, and he ended up having a great summer here. So it's a data point to what Rak was saying earlier.
We were in New York in June asking the question to New York VCs, will New York ever overtake Silicon Valley for the startup capital of the world? And I'm curious of y'all's opinion. Is it always going to be the Bay Area as the top dog for the startup capital of the world?
Always is a long time.
Maybe. Maybe. For the foreseeable future, maybe?
I think there are dynamics in Silicon Valley that are extremely hard to undo. And those dynamics, I think, make this place a very attractive place to build companies, join early stage companies for a very long time. I can't answer the top dog part because these things shift all the time. When fintech was the hottest sector, New York City did overtake San Francisco in venture funding in a couple of quarters at a time. I think now AI is sort of the hot sector, and San Francisco is dominating those charts again. But there's no telling what's going to be the next kind of wave. If it's, single room nuclear reactors, it could very well be Austin or El Segundo or a different place that becomes the venture financing headquarters of the world. I think broadly, though, the dynamics that make Silicon Valley are you have access to world-class universities, you have the world's greatest AI companies, and you have a confluence of customers, senior executives, people who have done the thing before, who have scaled sales, who have run go-to-market, or who have run a product organization before. And they all live here. And so as your company scales and you have to hire more of these people, it's actually very hard to hire them unless you're here. And these dynamics make Silicon Valley extremely retentive of talent.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if the top 5 or 6 AI companies were not based here, you talk about the Fairlab and at Meta or Anthropic or OpenAI or Contextual or what have you. There are DeepMind is not headquartered here; it's headquartered in London. Mistral is headquartered in Paris, and so you will see some other cities also pop up, and there may be some in New York too. But the majority of the companies are based here, and you have 2 world-class universities that are based here. And so I think it's hard to break that once the momentum starts going. It's hard to break it.
Rak, you were promoted to partner recently, correct? Congratulations. Before you were partner, were there any low moments in your career at Bain where you look back and say, that really shaped me to be the investor or even just the person that I am today?
Venture is a very disorienting job when you come from building products and engineering. When I was at Atlassian, and even before that, there is a roadmap in front of you that you are executing on. And if you ship the roadmap, you have dashboards that immediately tell you, did the feature or the product work? Did it not work? What do we have to change? What experiments can we run? The most disorienting part of VC is you have none of that. You don't have the roadmap, so you don't know what you're supposed to do day to day. And you don't have a dashboard that tells you, oh, our click-through rates went down a little bit. And there is no experimentation platform that says, yeah, I'll run an A/B test with 1 million startups and see what works. And so what you're left with is you build intuition very, very quickly, and you end up specializing. And so for me, I wouldn't call it a low point, but the first couple of months were really just sort of about reactivating my network, figuring out the kinds of companies, the kinds of spaces I wanted to spend more time in. And then it was about structuring my day and adding proxies around that to measure how I was doing. So that could be, different people do it differently. For me, it was sort of, I wanted to have one long form, insightful post every quarter. And then I wanted to have a set of security entrepreneurs who I had very close relationships with. And that was sort of how I decided to build out my venture career when I first started.
So we're talking a lot about just you guys as people, but I do want to kind of dig a little bit into cybersecurity as it relates to AI. I'm thinking about the election and deep fakes. What are your fears as we head towards November? I mean, we're pretty close already. For what kind of misinformation can be out there with AI, and how does your company, how does the cybersecurity at large need to handle how fast AI hacks and scams and deepfakes is just progressing and emerging?
Yeah, I'll focus on what we are doing, not quite related to elections, but when you think about opportunities at the intersection of AI and security, there are two elements to it. There is security for AI, which is a lot of what you were referring to. How do you make sure that there's not misinformation, deep fakes, and somebody put together a video of myself and send it to my mom saying I need money and I'm in jail. And I mean, it's amazing what you can do today with deep fakes, and how do you recognize that? So there is a massive consumer element to this, where how do you protect consumers from misinformation, from deep fakes, particularly in election year? And I don't really have a good perspective on what folks are doing to address it. Maybe Rak, you can touch on that. The area that we are focused on is how can you leverage AI to better provide security to enterprises or to businesses, right? And so that's a element that we think also has tremendous opportunity to get right. If you think about email phishing attacks, for example, they're getting more and more sophisticated because adversaries are using AI to generate compelling emails, and they can go through the internet and make it very relevant to what you did yesterday, right? And you have to be super, super careful about what's real and what's not. And so if they're going to do this and generate email phishing attacks at scale, leveraging AI, then how can you do a better job at defending them, right? How do you do a better job of detecting them? And if you don't detect them, and if something does, if there is a breach, how quickly can you recover from it? So that's the area that we are focused on. But Rak, maybe you can touch on, deep fakes and misinformation elections.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit unsettling, the fidelity that AI models can produce really compelling, believable visuals, video, audio, really just multimodal content that really, most people, I think, if you gave it to them in a vacuum, would say, oh, that's crazy. They would believe it. At the same time, I think defenders are getting access to Gen AI technology and are using it in a bunch of different ways that's never been possible before. And so to your point about election interference on social platforms like X and Meta, I'd be shocked if content moderation hasn't gotten much better, because AI models are really good at classifying content, much better than armies and fleets of human moderators could ever be. And so, on the one hand, you have probably spiking Gen AI enabled, Gen AI produced content that maybe we don't want on these platforms. On the other, you have these tools that make it much easier to govern that content, that make it easier to add safeguards for that content. And that's just in the consumer world. In the enterprise world, as Kamal was saying, business email compromise always been a really big problem. Now, the leading business email compromise companies are using Gen AI models to classify these messages much faster, to automatically write follow-up so that your security team is aware of these attempts. Yeah. And so I think what's happening is, as technology evolves, security evolves with it. That's part of the reason why it's such a dynamic field. And generative AI is just yet another tool that both attackers and defenders are using.
Yeah, fighting AI with AI. And so, yeah, so I've heard you guys mention a couple times kind of the good guys and the bad guys. And I think we all can have a sense of what clearly that means, the bad actors within the world. But do you guys have values within your company that help you always kind of stay on the line of we are the good guys? Because I'm sure there are gray areas sometimes. What are those gray areas, and how do you make sure that you as a company are staying on the right side of the good versus bad fight?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm trying to think of an example of a gray area so I can be specific in answering that question. There are certain things that you want to be careful in how you go about leveraging AI. So a good example of that is, if we trained the underlying models with raw data from enterprises, right, then we could potentially get better results. But enterprises don't want you to use the raw underlying data to train those models because they're concerned about data leakage, right? And so here's an area where, where do you draw the line, and how do you ensure that a company's data is protected, even though that might limit the efficacy of your models in detecting bad behavior.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a fine line there that you kind of have to walk and say, okay, what are you giving up and what are you getting in return? And then how transparent are you in communicating that information with these customers, right? And so that's an example that I can think of where you have to be very upfront and transparent and then stick to it. Because if you don't, and if there is a breach, then the consequences of that can be very detrimental to the company, both companies. Yeah.
Is it, and I might be just speaking about things that aren't really real, but is it possible that a hacker can kind of have access to everything potentially, and so they can kind of go as fast or as slow as they want? Whereas if you're trying to be a good guy, you have to say, no, I'm not going to cross certain lines. I'm not going to have access to all of the data that would allow me to keep up with how fast a bad actor might be moving. Is that even relevant to this conversation? I don't know if I'm understanding that correctly, but does that kind of make sense that you kind of have to hamstring yourself as the good guys sometimes? And
not in the specific instance, but I'll give you an example of, when there have been breaches, for example, when there was a famous, Office of Personnel Management was breached, all the information about government employees, government contractors is now in the hands of bad actors, right? So now they have that information, and can they leverage that information to say, okay, let me go find out who contractor X or government employee X's children are or family is, and can we go and figure out what they're doing, and can we leverage that to blackmail them or what have you, right? So there are certain access to certain information that they could potentially leverage in a bad way. But when it comes to working with enterprises, it's unlikely they're going to have the access to the wide range of data that sits in the enterprise to be able to cause them harm at that level, right? I mean, there are differences in how much data they have access to. So I don't worry about that as much as what they're trying to go for is a single point of failure in the enterprise, right? So where's the weakest link, and can we go and exploit the weakest link to break into the enterprise? And that's the challenging part of this, is that as a good guys, you have to protect every single flank, right? Make sure every single door, every single window, every single crack is protected. And when you're a large enterprise, or even a medium or small size enterprise, that it's a wide area to cover, and it's not easy to do so.
I've heard that people are still the weakest link in the chain for those kinds of break-ins and the weakest link. So is that what you found to be true? That humans just making a mistake or clicking on the wrong link or opening the wrong email?
Yeah, absolutely. It's clicking on the wrong link, opening a wrong email, or misconfiguring something in their environment, which is just an error that ends up being exploited and becomes a bigger issue. So I would agree with that.
As we get to the end of our time here, I want to bring us back to some personal questions for both of y'all. If you weren't an investor, if you weren't a founder in profit security, what would you be doing with your life right now? Rak, we can start with you.
I would most likely be a librarian.
Really?
I have always just been addicted to reading and learning. I volunteered in a library for about a decade when I was growing up. And so if money was no object and I couldn't be an investor, I would go work at a library.
What are you reading right now?
Currently, I'm reading this great book on running open source investigations.
Okay, what's it called?
It's called Running Open Source Investigations.
Oh man, that's crazy. If you had a book recommendation that's not that, to give Josiah and myself.
The common man.
The common man.
I actually,
the lower IQ individual.
I really enjoyed this book called God, I'm forgetting the name. Oh, it's called A Fine Balance by Rohinton Mistry.
Okay.
And it's the story of 4 disjointed strangers who, across 4 generations, their descendants' lives kind of intertwine in interesting ways.
Interesting.
And the setting is pre-partition India during partition, and then post-partition. And so it's this really tumultuous time of both political but also ethical and religious just kind of differences that are popping up. And these 4 storylines just intersect in really interesting ways.
Have you ever heard of or watched the show Dark on Netflix?
I haven't.
It is a German show about these generations of families who their lives are intertwined, and it's about time. It is mind-bending, but one of the best shows ever made.
Yeah, big time guy. He likes horology.
You like horology? Then I really would highly recommend watching Dark on Netflix. It's in German, so I would say watch subtitles, don't do the dubs. And it's one of the best shows ever made.
I'll check it out.
Really, really good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kamal?
Yeah, I would be living in Rome, studying the history of the Roman Empire and learning how to play an instrument.
So when people ask you how often do you think about the Roman Empire, you say every day?
Every single day.
Just about. And what I watch on Netflix is all this history about the Roman Empire and the Medici family and Florence and the Renaissance period. And I'm just fascinated by the evolution of the Roman Empire. And I think it's still, it forms how the government today here, works in some ways. And so that's kind of my passion. Yeah.
What instrument would you want to learn how to play?
That's a good question. It would be if
the drums.
No, I mean I would love to, but I think it would be either the piano or the guitar, one of the two. I took a little bit of piano lessons, but guitar is my new passion. So
maybe whenever profit security IPOs and you have some time on your hands, then you can learn how to play either one of those instruments.
I might not wait till then. I might start soon. So I'm kind of contemplating as I'm getting more and more free time, as my kids are becoming more and more independent, what to do with that.
Got it. Rak, Kamal, we really appreciate y'all's time today. Thanks for being on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks.